The World Cup has been insane, with many countries represented battling to find the best country at Overwatch. But more importantly, we've been seeing some really wacky compositions and some untraditional things that I want to break down and talk about. Many of the compositions that are being played will have a huge impact over defining the meta, and let's talk about what those compositions are. But before we do, smash that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and let's jump into the video. Now, while I can't cover every single composition that has been played, I can talk about a lot of the ones that are being repeated over and over again, and the variations and interesting picks inside those. First off, let's talk about Dive, which is typically being played with a Winston or a D.Va. D.Va seems to be a little bit better equipped for the mirror, but Winston is better equipped to deal with some of the problematic characters that are seeing play, namely like Ramatra compositions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Winston can enable your dive team a bit better because of that team bubble. Now, in order to enable either Winston or D.Va, we're seeing a combination of several different supports. We're seeing an Ana with a Brig, an Ana with a Kiriko, and then we're also seeing a Lucio Kiriko dive that happens quite a bit. Sometimes also a Lucio Moira dive, which happens less frequently but is still happening. Moira is actually seeing pretty substantial play, and every single one of these compositions with the support duos has power in different ways. Like the Ana Brig composition, Ana Brig is like a package deal that protect each other. Extremely powerful, plus you get to rally and kind of transition aggressively with your dive. And we're seeing a lot of nanos on Winstons and Divas. And then if we go over to the Lucio Kiriko composition, this is a more traditional where the Lucio and Kiriko are undivable. They don't play adjacent to their team, they kind of travel around with them, and then they can also aid in the dive themselves from close distance, going in with that dive. The Kiriko Lucio Winston core is really adjacent to the Overwatch League Season 1 composition, which had like a maxed out pick rate, which was the Winston Lucio Kiriko Sojourn Reaper comp. Now, we're seeing tons of variation in the DPS that are picked. Tracer is being picked a shit ton, almost all the time. There are a couple of times where a Sombra is picked instead, but for the most part, Tracer is kind of a staple in every dive composition. Makes sense, she's freaking nuts. But the DPS that are being paired with Tracer actually create some interesting situations. Ashe is being preferred among most of the top teams, if not all of them, as opposed to Hanzo and Sojourn the most of the time. And this seems kind of strange, right? Playing Ashe when you are playing a dive composition, and Ashe doesn't have a pocket. There's no Mercy that is being played with the Ashe. It's just an Ashe by herself. But there's a couple of things that Ashe does that Hanzo and Sojourn cannot. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, a DPS that is seeing a lot of play is Echo, and Ashe is a good hedge against Echo. Two, Ashe can represent a Tracer one-shot a lot more consistently than especially a character like Sojourn. And I think a really important aspect is that Bob is just insane. In these dive mirrors, Bob is one of the best ultimates that you could possibly have as a DPS. It's insane what it forces out. Typically it's going to force out beat. Typically it's going to demand a huge response from the enemy team. And yeah, I think all these reasons combined make Ashe no pocket favored in these dive compositions. Very, very interesting. Now, I will say that actually gets swapped out for Hanzo on certain maps. On maps like Gibraltar, we've been seeing Hanzo preferred because Ashe can't constantly retake that high ground, but Hanzo can. You get taken off the high ground, Hanzo takes it back. And on the really, really high ground centric maps like Jib, it seems that teams are preferring D.Va slightly as opposed to Winston. Now, also, I did talk about that Echo, which is amazing. We're seeing a lot of Echo without pocket. We're seeing some Echo with pocket rarely. This is really the only time that we're seeing Mercy is if the pocketing Yezen, which is just the best Pharah player in the world that plays for Saudi Arabia, or we're seeing it sometimes a Mercy is with an Echo, but Echo is actually being played a lot more without a pocket. The Echo is really, really good on a lot of Koth maps or any maps with high ground, maps like Nubani. We're seeing quite a bit of Echo use, especially when the players on the team have some sort of specialty or affinity to Echo. And yeah, Echo's just looking really, really good right now. And we're seeing a lot of copies actually on supports, especially Ana's, being able to copy an Ana, nade something right away, heal up your tank, nano them right away. It's looking really, really strong. And then we're also seeing Sombra, of course. Sombra, typically in a lot of these dive compositions, played alongside the Tracer as a disruptive element that builds EMP, and EMP is looking really, really good, not only just in the mirror, but against the other compositions that are seeing play, namely the Brawl Rush hybrid. And this is what I wanted to kind of transition to, where we're seeing Junker Queen see a decent amount of play, but the character that has really kind of blown up is Ramattra. Ramattra is seeing a ridiculous amount of play right now. Typically, this is the composition that is centered around Ramattra. A Mei with a Hanzo, a Sojourn, or a Reaper. Typically, Mei is like almost always played, and it seems like in the battles between Ramattras, Mei Wall and Mei's ultimate are two of the most important things that are just on the battlefield. Specifically, being able to deny Ramattra's ultimate and space with that wall, being able to trap people and kill them even through B, or put your team in a position to kill them even though B goes through because they're all frozen. Mei is kind of just super, super strong in all of these Brawl Rush compositions. And then we're seeing either Hanzo and Sojourn take these really wide off angles and apply pressure. Hanzo just trying to take pot shots all day. Sojourn a bit better at being able to be highly mobile and take a really wide angle out of nowhere, while Hanzo has that one-shot potential. But we're seeing teams kind of pick in between both of them depending on the map and a couple of other factors. And then we're seeing some Reaper sometimes, because Reaper is actually an amazing DPS into Ramattra, especially into the mirror. Ramattra pops your ult. Reaper can sustain through that a good amount just by trading damage with his lifesteal. His ultimate is incredibly strong as well. And in these metas, when you're speeding in the Reaper's just actually showing himself to be really, really strong right now. And of course, he also can't get one shot out of nowhere with Hanzo. So yeah, we're actually seeing a fair amount of Reaper play, which was definitely interesting. And these Brawl compositions are legitimately scary unless there's a high ground centric map that you can kind of utilize dive and abuse many of the elements to dive. It's looking like this Ramattra Brawl is just super, super, super good at sustaining against dive, but it is map specific. And it looks like we're actually in a map based meta, which is always a good thing. And I think it's pretty exciting. Now, I will say that the supports around the Ramattra or sometimes Junker Queen Brawl is Lucio, always. You need a speed, you need the Lucio to enable the Ramattra. And then we're seeing some Kiriko, Moira, or Baptiste, all for various reasons. I think Rush is still very, very strong. Moira just gets to kind of pressure out things from her own angle, and Coalescence has been a really, really great way to be proactive. And combined with Ramattra pushing forward, you can do a lot of damage to the backline out of nowhere and actually break through and get some of these kills. And then Bap, of course, just being able to really help the Ramattra and the Ramattra mirror trade blows, keeping your Ramattra full. Now, I didn't see every single match, but I do believe that we did see a bit of Ana as well. And it's interesting to me how the Brawl maps and the dive maps are going to kind of run into each other when we get to the later rounds, where it seems like some teams are more specialized in dive. Some teams really, really prefer to play that Brawl a lot more. So I'm definitely interested. Then, of course, we're also seeing some interesting strategies kind of being whipped out, like Circuit Royale on defense. We're seeing like spawn camps. In fact, we're seeing a lot of spawn camps all around, just because you get multiple fights. You spawn camp, you fight at the spawn, you build up those ultimates, and then even if you die, you potentially get to have a whole extra fight when normally you would just give up that entire corner for free. Definitely interesting strategies that I would wonder if we're gonna ever see them in ranked. Probably not, but maybe if you were yelling at your whole team and say like, hey, let's spawn camp, you could kind of do it every once in a while. But it's definitely interesting to see how this meta is kind of playing out. A lot of the characters that are extremely strong: Ashe, big winner, of course. Echo, big winner, of course. Ramattra, big winner. And a lot of these supports are seeing a lot of diverse play. We're seeing a ton of supports seeing play. Pretty much every support is seeing play besides Zen. We're seeing Zen a lot less frequently. I think that's mainly just because there's so much Tracer running around. And of course, Sombra is pretty good as well. But I also do think that maybe there's a place for a Zen poke composition with Sigma going up against Ramattra, because that is like one of Ramattra's weaknesses, I would say, is a Discord and being poked out. But definitely let me know what interests you the most about all these compositions that are being played. What character are you most excited to see pro play? And please caress that like and subscribe button, and I will see you next time.